This program is brought to you by First National Bank of Batswana.
FNB, how can we help you?
Debt. In its lay terms, it refers to borrowing money from individuals, a group fund, banking facilities, and so on. In order to smooth an expenditure, households increasingly use debt, thus leading to elevated levels of indebtedness. It has become common occurrence to come across in the matter between articles in local publications, the rise of vehicle repossessions by banks, while the real estate industry is rife with homes on auction, as Batswana continue to overcommit their incomes. Due to the high demand of credit, the financial industry has also seen an explosion of informal micro-lending entities whose interest rates of over 30% leave their customers down on bended knees in defeat. Some individuals, including whole households, have lost everything, including their last teaspoon, to repay debt amounts that were above what their incomes could sustain. In the next coming few weeks, we will have a series exploring what debt is, what the burden of debt on society is, and how we can, in the end, look at debt differently to make it work for every individual. Good evening and welcome to First Issues. I'm Pana Tabongwenya. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Tonight we ask, what is debt? And what are the various forms of debt? And exactly how is it that a lot of times people find themselves over-indebted? Here with us is Bona Life CEO, Ms. Regina Sikale-Selevaka, who will help us unpack this phenomenon.
Debt is simply put using somebody else's money or borrowing somebody else's money and having to pay it back. And normally you have to pay it back with interest. And they're charging you interest because there's a risk to them of them giving you that money. So they have to charge you in case that risk materializes. For instance, if you don't pay or you are laid off and you are no longer able to pay back the debt. The most obvious one is going to the bank and asking the bank for money. And I think that's what we do with micro-lenders as well, because those are financial institutions that are dedicated for that. But you also have debt that you can get through the informal sector, or you can get money from individuals. But the bottom line is that you are taking somebody else's money that you have to pay back to them.
Maybe one could ask themselves, seeing that our household debt is really reached a glass ceiling and breaking it actually, how do people find themselves in those kind of situations where they are over-indebted?
Yes, I think in the context of Botswana, debt has probably it's gone off at a spiral. And the reason for that, I think, is that we're maintaining lifestyles that are way above what we can afford. So we're using debt to fund a lifestyle that we cannot afford. Whereas debt should really be used for you to acquire things that you are not able to save for, but are necessities in your life. So you should be getting debt, for instance, to pay for a house, because you can't afford to pay for a house, to save for a house. Or if you're going to take your child to university, you can get debt for that. But if you are getting debt for perishable items, then you are not using debt effectively, because you are getting it to sustain something that you do not need.
Okay, so people are over-indebted, but how can we make individuals aware of scales of measure, or what scales of measure are there that individuals can use to determine whether or not to get more debt?
You need to be able to work on a budget of the money that you have. And you need to be able to ask yourself the question, do I need this? One, is it essential in my life? And if I do get it, is it something that I can sustain going forward? If you can't sustain something going forward, it means you can't afford it. It's as simple as that. But what happens is that we find we can't sustain something, and then we turn to financial services to give us the money to bridge the gap. And that's how we become permanently on debt, because we can't now afford to get ourselves out of that thing.
How come it is then that even when a person can't afford to pay for their current debt or the interest that keep accruing because of that debt, financial institutions still lend people money?
I think we have to understand that financial institutions are not, they're not charitable organizations. So they're there to make a profit. And we have to understand that if the bank is giving you a loan, it's not doing it for you. It's doing it so that it can make a profit. The fact that you are benefiting out of that is consequential. But the main reason why a financial institution exists is so that it can make money for its shareholders. So we have to train ourselves to live a conscious life. And living a conscious life is a life where you interrogate everything that you want to do. You interrogate how you are going to spend your money. You interrogate whether these are the things that you need to spend money on or not. You can't rely on any other external person like the bank or the government or your relatives to be giving you a reminder of what you can afford and what you can't afford. It's very, very personal.
As much as the issue is self-introspection and self-regulation and knowing and understanding that you have to live your life within your means, is there enough information on debt management readily and excessively available for the public to use?
I don't think so. I don't think that there is enough information. There's a very big gap in terms of educating people on financial management and so on. But I think the more important question is whose responsibility should that be? And a lot of the times we tend to think that it should be the responsibility of the financial institutions or the regulator or some other person. And that is being defeatist, because you are asking the same institution that is making money from you to educate you out of making money from you. So it doesn't really, it's not logical. What we should be doing is that we should just take a step back. And that's why I said earlier on about living a conscious life. Take a step back so that you gain charge and you take charge of your own life. Instead of looking at what the Joneses are doing, you need to be looking at what you should be doing for your family. And it would be great if government could intervene, because ultimately it ends up being a problem for society. When you are under debt, it puts on a lot of pressure on you. Some people end up with lifestyle diseases like diabetes, depression. So it ultimately ends up being a problem for the government. So it would be, in an ideal world, the government should be intervening to say, we will make it compulsory for financial institutions or which other entities are making money from their customers to have a corresponding responsibility to educate them.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world, because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Gone are the days when consumers worried about being cheated out of their hard-earned money by shifty suppliers and service providers, courtesy of the new Consumer Protection Act. Now, following the Act, consumers can look forward to being protected against misleading product marketing, pulling out a fine print to lay out service terms that were not disclosed at the beginning of a contract to evade service provision, or having to deal with the consequence of late service delivery by a supplier, amongst other things. The new Act comes after a repeal of the 1998 Consumer Act that many argued favored the service provider more than it did the consumer. The long-awaited law sees the introduction of stiffer penalties at the jubilation of consumers, which comprises fines and jail time or both for perpetrators. Amongst those in celebration of the introduction of the new consumer law is consumer rights activist Richard Harriman, who is here today to help us understand exactly what the new Act means for the consumer, what some of the key areas in the Act are, and what he thinks are some of the loopholes that can be tightened.
The Consumer Protection Act, the new Consumer Protection Act of 2018 is a really, I think, a really welcome development from the previous act, the 1998 Act, which was great. I have no real complaints about the 1998 Act, but it was getting on a bit, like me. It was getting old. Yeah. It needed to be refreshed, and it also, there were certain areas that needed to be addressed that weren't covered in the previous act. Things like advertising. For the first time, we have an explicit section of the law of Botswana that talks about advertising, what can be said, what can't be said, and put some rules of conduct on the advertising industry, which I think is very, very welcome. There's also the best thing for me, one of the best things for me, is that for the first time in our history as a nation, pyramid schemes and Ponzi schemes are now explicitly made illegal. Oh. Even joining one is now made illegal. Yeah. Not just running one, not just operating one, not promoting one. Joining a pyramid scheme. You can face a fine of up to 100,000 pula and 5 years in jail. Just for joining a pyramid scheme, or both, which would be even better. But so there's some of the gaps in the previous legislation have now been explicitly addressed. Ponzi schemes and pyramid schemes is a big one for me because no law, no agency had real control over those things. Now we absolutely do. And the penalties, as I said, are very high.
What areas should the consumers be looking specifically at or paying most attention to?
They should be looking at, for instance, things like advertising. Yeah. Advertising is now very, very tightly controlled. Claims can't be made unless they can be substantiated. Yeah. You can't make misleading claims in an advertisement, otherwise you face those fines and those penalties. We now have much more specific requirements about warranties. Yeah. You can't just say, there's no warranty on this product. Yeah. The new Consumer Protection Act says that all products have a 6-month warranty.
All of them?
All of them. Now, most products that you buy have a 1-year warranty. Buy a TV or a phone, it'll have a 1-year warranty, sometimes even more. But for those organisations that say no warranty, no, that's gone.
No more.
There's now even warranties on repairs. If you take something to be repaired, that repair is now warranted for 3 months.
Oh. Awesome.
So they can't say, well, we repaired it last week and it's broke. No, not anymore. A 3-month warranty on repairs. When an organisation sells something, it has to be very clear about whether spares are available and whether they can repair things. We've heard so many times about people buying some expensive item of technology, a phone or a computer. It goes wrong after a week and the store says, oh, we can't fix that. We don't have the parts. We don't have the spares. We don't have the skills.
So then that is
That's
a
gone.
thing of the past.
That's a thing of the past. Mail order is a new item. A lot of us have seen that there's companies like Home Choice that you buy from across the border in South Africa. Well, and mail order is going to start, I think, there's certain companies do this in Botswana already. But now, for instance, on mail order, you have a right to cancel. Written in the law, you can say, within 10 days, I've changed my mind. Direct sales. Someone comes to your door and selling something. You can change your mind within 10 days with no penalty. So there's a whole lot of new protections. And what we'll be doing, and what I suspect the new authority that governs this new act will be doing, I hope they'll be doing, and certainly we will be, is spending a lot of time educating the public on what this new law means for you and me, what consumers need to know. You don't need to go and buy a copy of the act. I don't think it's printed yet, but when it is, because it's very boring. It's like most bits of law, half of it is there shall be an establishment and so on. We'll be summarising the really juicy bits, the really exciting bits for consumers. So join our Facebook group and you'll see lots of education about what this actually means for you and me.
So then there's been issues of fine print. You know, we have service providers who give you a manual or really a print of what they're going to be, how they're going to be offering a service. And then when it's time for them to deliver on a service, say for example, insurance is very common in insurance companies, right? So you need for them to insure your car, you now need to get your car fixed for whatever reason. And then they tell you, no, but in our fine print, this is what it says. How then does this new act guard against such issues?
It does guard against them. There's an entire section of the act about contracts. And it makes it very clear that you can't use misleading terms, you can't cause confusion. You have to use language that is reasonably simple as possible. Yes, contracts have to be complicated. They're legal agreements.
I mean, it's legal,
but they can't mislead people. They can't put in a clause that allows you to waive your rights. You'll often see in some contracts, you agree to waive your consumer rights. Not anymore. That's gone away. That's a thing of the past. I say they can't use misleading terms. And one of the things, I actually have mixed feelings about this bit, but the section on contracts says that when a consumer signs a contract, every term and every condition in that contract has to be explained to the consumer first.
So even if there are 15 terms, so 50.
Last time I signed an insurance agreement, it was like 20 pages long and text this big. They've now got to explain every term and every condition. Then they've got to explain the implications of every term and every condition. And then, this is the bad bit, you and I as consumers, we have to sign or initial every term and every condition.
So if there are 50 terms, 50 conditions.
Signatures, 50 initials. And they've got to explain every one of them to you. Now, I understand why they're doing that.
Yeah.
Because, as you say, I mean, sometimes the contracts are so complicated and they don't explain everything to you, and you go back a year later with some problem and they say, no, you didn't read section 37B. Well, they can't do that anymore. So I understand why the Act now makes them explain everything. But it means signing a cell phone contract or signing an insurance contract. It
would be as tedious as signing a lease contract, you know.
I don't know if you've ever hired a car. You have to initial lots of boxes. That's nothing compared to a life insurance policy, which we all should have, by the way. A vehicle insurance policy, we all should have. But now the process is going to be so time-consuming. I think we've got to find a better way. I understand why they've done that. But I think this is one of the areas of the new law where I'm slightly sceptical, slightly reserved. I'm not sure it's practical. One of the things we're waiting for is, one of the good things I think about the new Act, is that it removes responsibility for enforcement of the Act away from central government and puts it in this new authority. The competition authority that we all know is going to merge with the Consumer Protection Unit from government to form a new competition and consumer authority, which will be outside of government, allied to government, connected to government. It'll be a parastatal, but it will be a lot more independent and a lot more flexible. If you look at some of the other regulators and enforcers we have now, like BOMRA, the Medicines Regulatory Authority, who are really active because they have the independence and the power to do that. They're getting out there, literally kicking down doors in pharmacies in Francistown a few months ago, seizing bogus contraceptives. I'd like to see the new authority
do the same,
follow their pattern, get out there, be a lot more active. I think we're lucky the Competition Authority has actually been quite active over the last few years. You often see rulings from them, this merger can happen, can't happen, this acquisition can or can't happen. I think if we can retain that spirit of energy and drive, and we have some people who want to get their hands dirty, I would like to see a headline on First Issues, us reporting in a few months' time that the MD of a company who mistreated a consumer has gone to prison.
Because of that.
Because the Act says they can do that now. And has faced a staggering fine. Not just 5,000 pula here, 10,000 pula there.
But 100,000.
I want to see 500,000. I want to see serious fines for organisations. It only needs to happen once. And the entire industry would realise, okay,
this is serious business.
Consumers are now protected by an agency that is really prepared, as I say, to get their hands dirty.
What is the future of help? It's to help people find the great in themselves. The drive, the passion. Help them find their true potential. Help them stretch. Help them grow. That's why we help people help themselves, help the world. Because a little help goes a long, long way. FNB, how can we help you?
Welcome back to another edition of our Own Your Day, Own Your Life productivity segment. As international figures would have it, non-communicable diseases are on the rise and becoming much harder to treat. Financially, the burden this has on the business community has proven cumbersome, as most have to deal with a lack of productivity due to an insurmountable amount of sick leaves from ailing employees. Some individual challenges include an inability to reach one's personal goals, which leads to an incompetent, underproductive human resource, the end result of which may be a slowdown in the country's economy. In the next coming weeks, our resident guest, Dr. Kieran Bagat, unpacks this very common phenomenon that he has infamously termed the disease illusion, death by design. He says, unfortunately, Batswana have fallen prey to the Western Volkswagen of having complex diseases due to adopting their very fast-paced lifestyles.
The title Death by Design, the disease delusion, is really one that I've been toying with simply because of the nature of conditions that doctors are seeing today in Botswana and of course worldwide. If we just start with a list of questions, I think possibly almost all the lists that we'll mention, our listeners will say, I have this condition. You know, are you tired? Do you feel fatigued? Do you feel brain fog where you can't focus properly? Do you have periods where you can't sleep well? Do you have frequent headaches? In men, do you have failure to perform sexually? Is there loss of libido? Do you get stomach bloating? Do you get constipation? Lack of sleep? The feeling that you're continually stressed, the feeling that you can't relax, the feeling that you can't focus because you're always distracted. These are all the sort of things that our patients come and tell us on a day-to-day basis. To say, Naka, I can't feel energy anymore. I feel like I'm just constantly fatigued. I wake up and I feel tired. And it struck me that over the years what has happened is Botswana has joined the rest of the world in conditions that are not simple. They're conditions that are not issues like treating malaria or treating bilharzia or treating a urine infection or treating a pneumonia. These are simple conditions, requires an antibiotic or requires, if you have a fracture of your leg, it requires somebody put you in plaster of Paris and off you go and the wound will heal. These are much more complicated conditions and they have arrived because they have arrived by the design of your lifestyle that you've now implemented and changed from a very young childhood time.
We continue our discussion on the disease illusion, death by design series next week, where Dr. Kieran Bagat explains why this phenomenon is on the rise. Until then, from me, Panatsa and the rest of the First Issues team, good night. This program was brought to you by First National Bank of Botswana.
FNB, how can we help you?